Travis Perryman, and I'm going to be unpacking a national history standard. Now, to give a quick background, I'm currently an English teacher, but it is my biggest dream to be a history teacher to high school students one day. I have a bachelor's in world history and a master's in World War II history, which will be the big subject of this video. Now, here is the actual text of the standard, and it reads like this. It's a subset of NSS/USH.5-12.8, Era 8, the Great Depression and World War II, 1929 to 1945. And again, this is just a subset. Understands the causes and course of World War II, the character of the war at home and abroad, and its reshaping of the U.S. and U.S. role in world affairs. Now, the important points to note, the big verb here is understand all of these particular nouns. Now, but this big point, understand is a key feature here, but it's quite broad, especially when the students have to focus on the causes, the course, the character, both on the home front and abroad, and the reshaping of the U.S.'s role. And now here's what it really means once we break it all down. We have to know how it happened. That's what the causes are. How did we get there? How the Allies won. So that's going from the initial Axis success to Allied victory. The reality of the war in different theaters, particularly comparing Europe versus the East, Western Europe versus the Eastern Front versus the Pacific versus China, Burma, India, for example. And the changing U.S. domestic situation. We need to understand what that is and how the U.S. became one of the two superpowers. So those last 2 points are especially important because they not only change the fundamental character of the United States, they also leave it as one of the two top dogs left in the world. And this can easily be accomplished in 5 lessons, with lesson 1 bit being the preamble of sorts, lesson 2 being initial Axis success, U.S. entry into the war, lesson 3 decisive battles, the U.S. home front, particularly arsenal, democracy, home front culture, and changing social forces, and the start of big conferences that will affect the end of the war and the post-war. Lesson 4 being the Allies closing in and also the Holocaust, and lesson 5 being the final battles, the end, the founding of the UN, and the beginning of the Cold War. Now, here are the important skills that students need to demonstrate. They need to be able to analyze chronological order, go from beginning to end. And they need to demonstrate awareness and the impact of cause and effect. So for example, talking about the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, how that 20 years later is going to lead directly to the Second World War. And they need to be able to make arguments and back them up with evidence, and they need to demonstrate the ability to explain change from one point to another, because again, this is hugely transformative on the United States and the world in general. And here are the 21st century skills that they can apply. For example, critical thinking. They need to be able to learn, not just learn information, but argue in favor of opinions and demonstrate how they arrive at understanding cause and effect. Creativity, be able to make appealing presentations for their assignments, and I will talk about those later. Information literacy, this is especially important because they're going to have lots of information thrown at them, data, facts, figures, dates, and they will need to be able to parse through that and organize it. And productivity, they must be able to work efficiently and complete the assignments within a reasonable amount of time and meet deadlines. Of course, I can be flexible on that. Now, the assessments. At the beginning of class and the end of class, we can have entry and exit tickets, respectively. There will be online quizzes. I'd rather not have quizzes in class, even if it's in a physical setting. I think it'd just be easier to have them complete quizzes on their own time, maybe give them 2 or 3 attempts to get everything correct. And I would collect the scores and check their progress through a chart and tweak the difficulty of future ones accordingly. Have a final test that can be conducted orally or through a written version, and have them display their current work on their assignments at various stages, kind of like a battle operation. Here's the beginning, here's the final victory goal, here are the points you need to get along the way. And I would now, for students with varying literacy rates, the quizzes and assignments can be tailored to their level, And well, if students are having a harder time, they'll just understand the more broader context. If they're doing quite well, they could perhaps be given questions to understand more specific and very narrow concepts. And I would give translations of the important concepts to ESL students in their native languages. And I would potentially allow students who are not capable of writing or reading at the expected level to give an oral presentation of their country profile or other assignment. Now, speaking of which, here's a possible assignment number one: a country profile. There are many countries that fought for the Allies in the Axis, and they will be given, or they can choose specific ones that they want to talk about. They can do this individually, and they just need to analyze the country's attributes, both positive and negative, its leaders and generals and admirals, and how they won or lost the war. That's the basic part. But to encourage more gifted students, they can add more elements, including specific battle doctrines, famous or infamous weapons, and other interesting information specific to their country. And project assignment number two, it can be a newspaper or a journal. And this can be done on paper in class, or in the physical setting, or on a digital site, either in a physical class or on an online class. And the students will have the choice of making a newspaper chronicling the years 1939 to 1946. So I would say the summer of 1939, as war clouds are brewing over Europe and the war in China is already in full swing, or has been in full swing for 2 years at this point, and up to 1946, while we are deep into the occupations of Germany and Japan, and the UN is becoming more of a force and actually comes into existence, and the Cold War already starts showing signs of life. And they could also do it from a POV of they could have a journal from the POV of an American soldier on a front of their choice, so Europe or the Pacific, or China, Burma, India, or the Battle of the Atlantic if they wish to get more specific in that regard. And they could also have it from the POV of a civilian in a factory back home, because they would be witnessing profound social change. Thank you for your time.